In this movie, we'll take a look at the final path available to students who are conducting science investigations with SPARKvue, and that's the open path in the lower left. Above the open button are a number of sources of files that I can open, and these include online storage services. We saw these earlier, things like Google Drive and Dropbox, and this is a great way for instructors to distribute SPARKlabs to a large number of students. I'm on a computer, which allows me to browse the file system, so Other is available for me to browse wherever I'd like to get a SPARKlab file. Saved work is the default save location in SPARKvue, so students who are conducting an investigation can save their entire SPARKlab in this location and reopen it for later use. And finally, the Experiments folder. The Experiments folder contains 7 SPARKlabs that are designed by PASCO and included with the SPARKvue application. These SPARKlabs span the sciences and grade levels, from high school through middle school and elementary school. Additional SPARKlabs are available at PASCO.com. I'd like to show you some of the features of a PASCO-designed SPARKlab, so I'm going to open this high school biology lab called Photosynthesis. I'll click on it and I get a preview of its first page to the right, and I'll now choose the Open button to open this lab. So I'd like to page through this SPARKlab and highlight some of its key features. Page 2 provides some background information for students conducting this investigation. Includes text, chemical equations, pictures, and the driving question for this guided inquiry investigation, which is, how does a plant affect the concentration of carbon dioxide in a closed container when light is shining on it and when it's in the dark? Now, SPARKlabs aren't just static documents that students read. They're interactive, as illustrated here on page 3. The students have just read some background information, and here they're asked by the author to answer some questions about that background information, the key points. These questions include a question with a text response and a multiple choice question to the right. Now, this author has chosen to indicate whether the student's choice is correct or incorrect. Great for formative assessment, so the student can determine whether they're ready to proceed with the lab. Now, recall from an earlier movie that if students wanted to create an electronic journal of the lab as they go through it, they could take a snapshot of any page. Page 4 lists the materials and safety for this lab. This lab requires only a carbon dioxide gas sensor with included sampling bottle, along with some household items. The equipment setup for this lab is described on page 5 in text, images, and a movie. In this case, this brief movie shows students how to calibrate the carbon dioxide gas sensor. By page 6, students are ready for data collection. There are instructions for data collection on the right, alongside the data display for that data collection on the left. So in this case, one of the great powers of the SPARKlab is the ability to have data displays and corresponding instructions side by side. During data collection, students are asked additional questions. And finally, after the end of the first trial in light, they're asked a number of analysis questions. Here on page 9, we see a graph to the left that would show the data that I had collected, and a question in the upper right for analysis and a place for students to respond in a text box in the lower right. Now, at this point, you might be asking, well, how are these SPARKlabs created? And it's really quite straightforward. We've already looked at the main procedure, and that is simply to build a series of pages. As an illustration, I'll show you how I could construct this page. I can choose the New Page icon, and this opens the templates that we saw in a previous movie. This particular page uses this template. And by the way, one advanced thing that authors can do is to insert a background image. This allows them to take advantage of graphics design tools and get something that looks a little bit nicer. But at its core, we're simply building pages using these templates. In this case, the author chose a graph on the left, an image in the upper right, and they chose to have a text entry box in the lower right. Well, I'll delete this page so we can return to the lab as it was authored. And here on page 10, students have conducted trial 1, that is the leaf in light, and they're asked a question about the experiment design. Why was it important for the leaf to be flat, to probe their understanding of why the lab was performed this way? On the right is a question asking students to make a prediction about what they think will happen in trial 2 when the leaf is in the dark. So students proceed to conduct trial 2 and analyze it. And then starting on page 16 are some synthesis questions. In this case, there's a video that illustrates a peanut being burned. and the questions to the left ask students to try to connect these key concepts for this lab of photosynthesis and cellular respiration. The final page of this authored SPARKlab is page 18. Now, so far students have been guided through an investigation of two different trials, one with a leaf in the light and the other in the dark. But we know one of the key practices of science is having students ask their own questions and designing and carrying out their own investigations to answer those questions. So in this case, the lab ends with an extension question asking students to design their own lab, write a hypothesis, and a testable question to the right. Students could create a new file for their own trials, or they could simply build a new page continuing this investigation. I'm going to return to the home screen to end our tour of the open path. And in this series of movies, we've looked at the three paths available to students who are conducting investigations with SPARKvue. We saw that the show path allows them to select a single measurement and quickly visualize that measurement in 4 different displays. The build path allows them to design their own investigation pages. And finally, the open path allows them to either open their own investigation or to open one published by PASCO or other authors that guides them through an investigation. Thanks for watching.